believe that a lot of the media wants us to be afraid and angry. I really value the truth and honesty, and I didn't feel that the media was interested in that anymore. I see it as a lot of manipulation, and whether it's intentional manipulation, accidental manipulation, or just people who are so entrenched in their ideology, they don't even realize that they're putting one side of the story.
That is former news anchor and Arizona gubernatorial candidate Carey Lake speaking out about the influence of politics and fear-mongering and manipulation in America's newsrooms. Carey Lake joins us now live on the program, and also joining us, former TV news reporter Ivory, who went viral after speaking out about her own newsroom in Houston. Great to see you ladies here. Thank you for coming on today. When we think of local news, I've got a local news background as well. I worked in northern Minnesota. You think of stories that affect local residents, including the weather. There's plenty of time for weather segments. You also follow the local high school sports as well. And unless it's an election year where you cover local candidates, typically national politics stays out of the newsroom. Kari, you've expressed that some of these news organizations have become more political, though. What led you to this conclusion?
Well, I mean, working in the media for almost 30 years and seeing the steady decline of unbiased news. We used to be unbiased. And so that means we would cover a story, we would cover both sides of the story. Sometimes there's even three sides of the story, and we'd cover it all. And it just got to the point where the media was doing less and less of that. And as it got filled up, the people in the newsrooms with people who had more liberal ideology or were more Democrats, you saw their kind of own personal beliefs seeping into the news. And if they were going to cover both sides, they were always going to cover the Republican side, the conservative side in a negative light, or pick the worst sound bites to make the conservative side look bad. And it especially went into hyper speed when President Trump came on the scene. And I guess you could say he cracked the shells off the nuts in newsrooms across the country.
I know we've also spoken to during COVID. It really stood out to you, maybe how some newsrooms approached COVID and also some treatment opportunities for COVID as well. And Ivory, you spoke out against your own news organization. You felt as though you were being muzzled from covering certain COVID-related stories. I'll ask you, Ivory, have you seen diversity, and I'm not talking about diversity of race or gender in your newsrooms, but diversity of thought when it comes to covering these stories?
There's definitely a culture of fear in the newsrooms where if you do have a thought that's outside of the narrative, people protect themselves by keeping that thought secret. There's a fear to pitch certain stories that are outside the narrative. We definitely saw that in healthcare this past year when the national story became the local story for stations across America. I just posted on social media screenshots of just several of the messages I've received from journalists in newsrooms across America. This is a rampant problem. And like Carey mentioned, when it comes to politics, whether it's national or local, there is a culture of a left-leaning slant. There's a culture of saying the right-leaning section of our audience doesn't matter. We're not going to answer their questions. That's unjournalistic. All audience members matter. And by alienating a huge swath of your audience, you are committing a slow suicide for your ratings. People are turning off their TVs.
Well, in fact, Kari, you had sort of a recent experience during an interview with a local reporter. Again, this having to do with the slant against conservatives. The moment got a little tense. Let's play that, and then I'll get your reaction.
You did not give money to Barack Obama.
My husband did. So I guess you could say our family's money went there, yeah.
Okay, so...
I mean, what are you getting at? Are you getting at that you can't be a conservative if you have donated money or ever... What's your point, Dennis? What's your point?
My only point right now is to try to get the facts straight.
Well, what I see is happening here is I'm running for governor, and rather than doing a story of, hey, a person who has worked in our industry, had an illustrious career, and is running for governor because she cares about the state, you're going to do kind of a hit piece or try to be derogatory, which is so typical of where the media goes.
It's a data point, whether you gave
That's
to John
fine.
Kerry,
That's
Obama,
fine.
or
That's fine. I'm not saying that we never donated to a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have.
Mhm.
What's the
And
problem? What's the
I
problem
was just
with
trying to find
that?
a
Again, a little heated moment there. The story have to do with personal political donations here. Kari, how did that story end up being covered? Did you feel as though it was covered fairly?
Well, it's interesting because I really took him to the mat. It was supposed to be a 5-minute interview. It went on 10 minutes, and that was the only question he wanted to ask. But he failed to mention that I've also donated to Republicans. It was just all about donations in the past, 17 years ago, 20 years ago, to Democrats. He failed to mention that I've also donated to Republicans, but that wasn't part of it. He was just looking to have a hit piece, and I called him out on it. I know how things work in a newsroom. I know how it is, especially today, to walk into a editorial meeting and pitch a story that would involve somebody who's more conservative. It always has to have a negative angle to it. You'd never just do a positive feature piece on somebody who is more conservative. And I think Phoenix needs some fair political reporters. He's known for doing that. I called him out on it. And I don't know if it changed how he covered the story on me. I would say it was a tiny bit more fair than he would normally cover a story, because he'd been called out and it had already kind of gone around the world, I guess, by the time his piece aired on me. It was a tiny bit more fair than he usually covers people.
And final thought, Kari, do you think that these newsrooms lack diversity of reporters who might come from different viewpoints? As Ivory pointed out, they seem to skew more liberal in how they view their stories and how they might view coverage. Is that because there aren't Republican voices in news?
Exactly. And there are a few. I would say 95% of newsroom staff is liberal, leftist, or leans left. And the 5% that would be conservative are self-censoring themselves and afraid to speak out in the climate that we're in right now. So even though there might be 5 or maybe 7% of a newsroom that is more conservative leaning, they are muzzled and they're afraid to speak. So you might as well have no conservative perspective in a newsroom, because they don't feel that they have any freedom to speak out.
Really interesting to hear. Of course, both of you ladies, you've got experience working in local news. You're the ones to talk to about it. Carey Lake, Ivory Hecker, thank you both for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.